If you've ever coached gymnastics, you've experienced athletes being afraid. The whole athletes have fear problem, and sometimes people get into this trap of believing in mental blocks. And I am not a fan of mental blocks, although they exist. I don't even like calling them that, because oftentimes you ask a kid, like, what are you afraid of? And they're like, I don't know. And they don't even know what they're afraid of. And it's like, how can you be afraid of something if you don't even know what you're afraid of? And so what I've found is that I feel like we use words when we don't understand something, like magic. That's magic. We use words when we don't understand something because we need to create a reality. Like, our brain cannot imagine things that do not exist. And so we have to create the existence of something to fill that void. And so that's, to me, what the abuse of the word mental block has turned into. Oh, they have a mental block. If you cannot label what the problem actually is, they don't have an anything. You actually need to label the problem. Once you can label the problem, now we can talk about the mental block. But until you can label it, it's a nothingness. You have a nothingness problem, and we need to find what the something is. And so I just want to talk about fear, because this is what traps people, especially you coaches who are dealing with athletes who have mental blocks, and then you have to go talk to parents who are disgruntled and are just frustrated because their kid should be, whatever the expectation is. My kid should be better than what they really are. And it comes down to just people not understanding, really, coaches not understanding what mental blocks really are. And I'm talking superficial level, like you're coaching level 3s, 4s, 5s, you're coaching beginner level optionals, not high level, elite level 10 type of mental stuff. I'm talking about low level, just kids having fun doing gymnastics, may not be super dedicated or committed to the sport. They kind of want to have a social experience along with their learning, but they're afraid of that back handspring on a beam, and mom and dad don't understand what's holding them back, and you're trying to explain it all, but nobody has really a good answer, and you have to go to the floor and then the low beam, and maybe you go to the high beam, and then you eventually have to go back to the floor and the low beam. I mean, I personally have, it took me personally 6 years to teach myself how to do a backflip, because when I went to gymnastics as a kid, my coach didn't show up to work one day, and I just had to start teaching gymnastics. They're like, hey, you want to coach gymnastics? And I was like, sure. I came here to learn a backflip, but now I'll start coaching it. And so it took me 6 years. So if we're talking about mental blocks, okay, I'm very, very familiar with mental blocks. I'm very, very familiar with the struggle of trying to overcome fear, because it took me 6 years to teach myself. I didn't have anyone to spot me or teach me in the area that I was growing up in. So there's 3 layers to this, and I think it's very, very simple. And what I have found is once you understand these 3 layers to overcoming fear, okay, mental blocks, with overcoming it, it's not even a problem anymore. Like, I have yet to run into a scenario, and please let me know if some of you think that this would not work for you, but I have yet to run into a scenario where this doesn't answer the problem. I mean, maybe it's not 100% perfect, because there are nuances. I haven't met those kids yet whether it's not 100% perfect, but this tends to just answer the problem. So the 3 layers, confidence, okay, correlation, and then we can call it consequence, or really courage. Okay, so we'll just say confidence, correlation, and then consequence. Those are your 3 layers. Now, layer 1, kid is afraid of something. This comes down to a confidence problem. I'm going to be afraid to do something if I lack confidence in my abilities. Your brain will not do things very well if it lacks confidence in them. So this comes down to, like, maybe the athlete got injured. Maybe they rolled their ankle. Maybe they hurt their arm. Maybe they, I don't know, have a back injury. If they are not confident in their body's ability to put in effort at 100%, then they're going to hold back. And by holding back, then they're not going to be able to do as well as they need to on the skill. Therefore, the skill, as the skills get more difficult, have a higher demand of effort, they're not going to be able to produce that effort. Their brain knows that. Okay, like imagine a kid has a back injury from back walkovers and their lower back is hurting. And now she wants to do a back handspring, but she has inside her brain saying, hey, your lower back is injured. Don't go too hard on it, because you might re-injure your lower back. Is she going to jump as hard as she can? Is she going to have her technique the best she possibly can? Maybe, but maybe she still doesn't trust her lower back to be able to survive, because the back handspring appears to be a more difficult skill demanding more of her. So the fear would be that I'm going to re-injure my back. Now, a lot of people don't understand that lower back injuries on back walkovers generally are isolated to back walkovers. And if you get on a back walkover land and never back walkover again in your life, and you go into back handspring land, the injury doesn't usually happen in the lower back on back handsprings. It usually happens on your wrists from getting jacked up on the beam, from hitting the beam so many times with, heavy back handsprings. So the brain doesn't even understand, the switch in the skills changes where the injury is going to happen most commonly. I'm not saying you can't get a back injury from a back handspring, but that's not generally where the overuse injury happens. It's back walkover land. Okay, confidence. You have to have confidence in self. Now, how are you going to develop confidence in self? Like, again, you're taking an athlete who's trying to learn a back handspring on floor, but they can't jump very well. They're not going to have confidence in self. If I can't jump well, how am I supposed to learn a back handspring where I'm supposed to jump and invert upside down? You take an athlete who can't even punch the floor very hard, and then you want them to do a front tuck on the floor so they can just crash and land on their butt. They're not going to have confidence in self. Confidence in self comes down to repetition, numbers, effort, and energy at a higher level of intensity. And what you do to develop confidence in self, the simplest way I can explain this to understand, like, Raleigh, how can I take this right now and apply it to my class today? Confidence in self, to me, is the simplest way of describing this or explaining it is you put a person on a trampoline, you make them jump as high as they possibly can. So you ask for maximum effort on the easiest surface. Maximum effort on the easiest surface of the thing you're trying to do. And then you take them to a surface like a tumble track, which requires a little bit more effort. It's not as easy. And you realize that maximum effort is going to decrease a little bit on that harder surface. And then you train them there until they can maximum effort on that next surface. So I want to do a back handspring. I learned a back handspring on a trampoline because the trampoline requires the least amount of effort. It's easy, but I ask for a back handspring on a trampoline at maximum effort. Maximum, as fast as you possibly can go, as tight as you possibly can be, as clean as it can possibly be. Maximum effort. Then I take that from the trampoline and I take it over to the tumble track because now I've built confidence in self. And I take it to the tumble track and say, hey, you know what it feels like to go maximum effort on the trampoline. Take that over to the tumble track. Now the tumble track will require more effort. So therefore they're not going to be able to correlate the effort, but in the sense of the trampoline is assisting them, the tumble track not as much. So there'll be a breakdown. The back handspring on the tumble track will not look as good as the back handspring on the trampoline. So then you get maximum effort on the tumble track, right? That's it. Maximum effort on the tumble track. When you have maximum effort on tumble track, as tight as you can be, as fast as you can be, where we're talking, this back handspring looks like it could back whip. Then you take that back handspring and you put it on the floor. This is what confidence looks like. So when you have somebody who's afraid of something, you have to ask yourself the question, did I produce confidence in them, the ability to produce maximum effort? Now, beam. Fear happens on beam. Okay. Back handspring on beam. Commonplace for fear. Back walkover on beam. Commonplace for fear. Let's use this simple idea again. Why am I trying to overcome the fear on the beam when I don't even have the maximum effort required on the floor? Example. Now, there's another way to understand maximum effort. Okay, if I get that maximum effort on the trampoline for that back handspring, and I go to the tumble track, that's one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it is pushing the progressionary line. So I can go to trampoline, get back handspring, back whip, back layout. Now I've pushed the effort even farther than the demand of the effort even farther than what the back handspring will be asked of on the tumble track. So if I can go back handspring, back whip, back layout on the trampoline, of course I can go to the tumble track and go back handspring. Because my what's in my bag is just so much greater than what's being asked of me. And so that's the same thing with, you take it to beam. When you go to beam and you try to do a back walkover on beam, the problem is oftentimes these girls can't even do a double back handspring with a step out on the floor. So they can't even double back handspring step out on the floor, and they're already learning a back walkover on the beam. Well, they haven't even pushed the progressionary line to build confidence in self. Not only that, their back walkovers on floor are not at the highest quality possible potential, right? They don't have their front leg turned out. They don't actually lift their leg above horizontal as they initiate into the back walkover. They don't actually know how to back walkover slowly. They fall onto their hands. Like, there's a million things that go wrong on the floor. And then they're taking that floor back walkover, trying to stick it on a beam, and you're wondering why they're scared. And it's like, of course they should be scared because they don't have the potential. The potential has not been proven into their nervous system to say, hey, I've got this. I can actually do more than what is being asked of me. That's what confidence is. Confidence is the ability to know that you can do more than what is being asked of you. Okay, so that's the confidence layer. Anytime I see that there is lack of confidence in the system, it's backtrack to an easier surface, demand more from the person there. Okay, that's layer one. That's how we build down. If you do this right, and I don't know if you've seen this, but you see the athletes, the young athletes who are like, they're just slaying gymnastics. You're like, man, how are these kids so good? It's because their confidence layer has been built properly that they just don't run into these problems. Because there's really only like certain sticky skills in gymnastics, like cast a handstand. Kids will be afraid of casting to go upside down, especially when they're upside down elevated in the air. Okay, cast a handstand has a fear aspect to it. Back walkover on a beam, double back handspring on a high beam. Single back handspring doesn't seem to have the same problem as a double back handspring on the high beam. Back walkover seem to have a bigger problem sometimes than a single back handspring. But anyways, you got that whole entire problem. A standing back tuck on a beam oftentimes seems to be easier for an athlete than scarier. Weirdly enough, people seem to want to try side aerials on a beam. That's strange. So those are some sticky skills. What's another sticky skill? Double backflips on a trampoline. That's a sticky skill. Cody's on a trampoline is a sticky skill. Blind turning on a bar, that's a weird skill for kids. Front giants usually is. Back giants can definitely be a sticky skill for people where there's a fear problem. Flyaways, definitely a place where people get stuck at flyaways with having a confidence problem. But like, let's take flyaway, for example, with confidence. Most athletes who are lacking confidence in the flyaway, you can go take them and tumble them and ask them to do back layouts, and their layouts are not where they need to be. And say, well, I'm not trying to do a layout flyaway. And it's like, that's your problem. You should be trying to do a layout flyaway, because if you were doing a layout flyaway, the tuck flyaway would be easier. And so by the fact that you're not teaching a laid out flyaway, you've already made the tuck flyaway harder than it needs to be. Additionally, if you're on a trampoline doing back layouts properly with the proper chest, head, arms, which most people don't even know how to understand, then the athlete would understand that the shape change in the flyaway is very similar. But because most kids who are flipping are initiating the flip wrong, they're actually falling and pivoting off their feet instead of actually bending and snapping, which then allows the surface to do the work. They're actually trying to create rotation. This is trampoline conversation. Then with the flyaway, they don't understand how to just trust the rise and fall. All they do is shape change and let the rotation happen. They're trying to kick into the rotation instead of kick to rise and allow the rise and fall to actually be the energy for the rotation. And so because you're learning to flip wrong, confidence in flipping wrong, your flyaway then has the wrong effect, essentially. You start to pull your knees early because you're initiating the flip early, and all this other weirdness happens. Or you hold on to the bar too long because you're trying to, again, initiate flip by creating rotation while attached to the surface, instead of realizing that you will rotate because you already created a circle action on the bar. Okay, so confidence, it really comes down to knowing how to do things correctly and do them well. Now, correlation. The next layer that happens in when you see a breakdown in fear happen is correlation problems. And what you see is that an athlete who has a problem, say double back handspring on beam, will start having a problem on bars. They'll start losing their giants, their flyaways, they'll struggle in other areas. It seems to be that when there's a lack of confidence in one area, it opens a door for the brain to doubt itself in other areas. And so what I have found is, like, let's say you're learning a double back handspring on beam, I think level 8, and you're doing a souk vault. What I've learned is that the athlete is struggling with the double back handspring on beam, and they didn't start having fear with souk vaults, but eventually they just plateau on the souk vault and they can't get it any better. What I have found is it's not good to chase two areas that the athlete lacks confidence in, because it overexposes, or it basically increases the size of the wound. So it's kind of like, instead of like chasing two problems, let's chase one. So back off. Now people will go, well, if I don't do enough souks, then they're never gonna get their souk. It's like, yes, but this is the correlation aspect, and we could think of it like exponential effect, essentially. If I have confidence in the area I used to not have confidence, okay, I gain confidence in my double back handspring. That then bleeds over to the next area I am struggling in. This is what a lot of people don't understand, because I've seen this. I've done it actually as a coach, is I'm trying to chase too many problems at the same time, only proving to the athlete they're not good enough. And then I'm actually psychologically reinforcing a belief problem into the athlete, which is you're not good enough because you can't double back handspring on the beam, you can't flip your souk vault, you can't do a giant double tuck off bars, or you can't do your kip cast half pivot. I'm just proving to them that they're bad. You think I'm going to be building confidence if that's what I'm chasing? No, confidence first. You have to build confidence. If you're going to have a confidence problem, then you need to be able to overcome that problem through confidence, knowing that the overcoming of lack of confidence correlates to the other events. The athlete that does the souk vault will then try harder on the double back handspring. The athlete who does the double back handspring will then try harder on the giant flyaway double tuck because they've built confidence, because they overcame adversity. So that's the correlative effect. So once I know a person has confidence in something, like maybe the athlete has the confidence to do the double back handspring on the beam, but the problem is I'm chasing too many things. So I'm overloading the system psychologically. So that's the reason why it's like, okay, I don't need to build confidence in their ability to double back handspring. I need to take away the pressure or the anxiety being built into the system on trying to get everything. Okay, that's the correlative effect. So you back off, you hyper-focus in one area, allow the body, the psychological, the anxiety to hone in on one area of building confidence, overcoming adversity, and then you use that, you pivot off of that, leverage off of it into the other areas. You're going to see that it's going to pick up a lot better. Now, lastly is the courage. Okay, the courage phase is when you have an athlete who's at a level of maturity, and this is where coaches be like, just do it, or don't think about it and just go. You're on the courage phase. That's not usually, like, if your athlete is, below level 8, they're generally usually not in the courage phase. Courage is not what we're dealing with. The courage phase is, or consequence, okay? The consequence phase is think Red Bull extreme sports. I'm doing a skydive. I'm skydiving and I'm going from one airplane to another airplane and no one's ever done it before. That's courage. That's the consequence phase. The consequence phase is like you have an athlete who needs to flip a vault at competition. They've never done it before. You want to prepare them to be able to do it without a spot, even in warm up. And you go like, okay, you know you can do this. I know you can do this. And it's the first one of the day, the first flip of the day. If I spot you, you're not going to get that effect as if you're at competition, warming up and not being spotted. And you're like, why would I not spot a person at warm up? I'm just talking about prepping a person to have the maturity to just go compete. Okay. So you're like, okay, this is the first flip of the day. Everything's safe. We know you can do it. Historically shown that nothing bad's going to happen. Even if you do a bad vault, you're not even gonna under rotate. Just, nothing weird's going to happen. Do you want to do this? Do you want to play against the consequences of the error? That really isn't going to happen. But psychologically, you're so comfortable with me always standing there by the vault table. You're so comfortable with me always spotting the first one. And I'm taking you out of a comfort ability. Now, there's a huge benefit to getting to that psychological place where you can measure the consequence of something and just go, I'll just do it. But that comes after you've built such a solid foundation in confidence. You have trained the athlete to learn how to correlate their accomplishments into the next area. Now we can talk about consequence. This is like the athlete who's like, I'm just going to send it. All right, you got to do that double back tuck onto the mat. I guess I'm just going to send it, because you spot them every warm-up in competition during warm-up. But when they go to compete, you're not spotting them. They've got to go do it by themselves. That's a consequence type of problem. And so they're measuring the consequence of what happens if this goes south, if this goes bad, what's going to happen to me? What's the consequence compared to my confidence in self, my correlation in self? And they've got to have a deep enough tank, a well, full of enough data that basically says, I can trust the process and the system, and the consequence is not greater than my confidence in self. They might doubt, because it's the first one, they're going to have anxiety, they're going to be anxious. That's normal. But the consequence effect is to say, my anxiety will not hold me back because I have the confidence necessary to push through the anxiety. that's a very mature thing that you ask of a person. That really has to be their choice. You cannot pressure a person into it. You can present them the idea and say, hey, do you want to go for it? It's up to you. If you're not ready for it, don't worry about it. Chill out. We're not doing anything. But when you are there, we want to get to that consequence phase where an athlete, because this is where you look at the top athletes who can just kind of like play gymnastics, I just taught myself a new thing. Those are the people, those huck and chuck type of kids. Those are the kids that are playing with consequence. Oftentimes the huck and chuck type of kids who are playing with consequence haven't got bit yet. But once that huck and chuck type of kid gets bit, breaks a leg, does something, oftentimes that's like, oh, the consequence is greater than my ability to actually understand myself. And for some people, that can shut somebody down. Other kids, not so much. Their brain's still like, I don't care about the consequence. I'm still having fun. I don't care if I break my arm. I'll just go crazy again. There are those unique people. But for most people, when the consequence bites them, it proves to them that their confidence in self was inflated. And then they start to doubt their confidence in self. My experience is you cannot afford to have an athlete get hurt or injured or have a bad experience in the learning process early on. And when I'm saying early on, I'm saying all the way up to like level 8 gymnastics even. Maybe even close to level 9 gymnastics. Everything should be preventable, and everything is preventable if it's prepared properly. Because the consequence that happens, you're now dealing with that. That becomes the confidence problem. There was a consequence for what they did, and now you have to build confidence in self to prove that consequence will never happen again. And you're pitting, essentially, the experience they had, which was a very negative one, against the potential for the training to be successful. And if you haven't proven that your training can be successful, because one, the consequence happened. So clearly the training wasn't successful because the consequence said, hey, you just got hurt doing this thing. So clearly your training did not prepare you for it. So now you're working against that. It's a doubt. It's a lack of trust problem. And so you have to go back in time. What I found is, how many kids, who learn back handsprings, let's say they're moving through progressions, handstands, cartwheels, walkovers, back handsprings. How many of those kids all of a sudden want to be like, hey, sorry, your back handspring isn't good enough, so I'm going to send you back to handstands. Most people don't want to go backwards in time, and so they want to actually progress. And so the consequence, when the consequence bites you, you have to go back in time. And it's demoralizing, it's insulting, it's very hard for a person to have to go back in time and start over. It takes a very mature person to understand the process that these things do happen. As you mature as an athlete, as you actually understand the risk involved in this sport, then it becomes a more mature, honest, kind of adult type of conversation, like these things happen. But not at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, not at low levels. No, they don't make any sense to the kid. They're just there to have fun. They want to hang out with their friends. Yeah, they might be a competitor, but they're not looking to experience this whole, I had a consequence, I got bit, now I got to overcome that, build trust back into myself, build confidence, learn how to correlate, overcome my doubt. They're not trying to do any of that. You're getting to upper level gymnastics, and now you got to, push yourself into that 1% type of thing. Now it's psychological. Now you're trying to squeeze out as much juice out of the lemon as possible, essentially. And so then, yes, these things start to manifest in a way that has more value, more meat to them, that makes more sense for the athlete. But before the athletes get to that mature state, you really shouldn't even be playing with consequence at all. You should be trying to avoid and protect the athlete to ever experiencing poor consequences bad. Because I don't know if you've experienced this, but I early on, like when my first just bad situation happened as a coach, where something happened and you're like, I did not expect that to happen. Boy, did I feel guilty. Boy, did I feel embarrassed. Boy, did I feel like I let that person down, right? Like I was not prepared for the emotions that I was going to feel, let alone prepared to deal with the emotions they were feeling, let alone prepared to deal with how am I supposed to overcome this? What does the training plan look like now? Are they even going to trust me? Clearly what I was doing didn't work. Everything just comes crashing down. And so if you want to prevent that from happening, you've got to learn how to build confidence from the get-go You got to learn how to never step out of the box of confidence. You got to learn how to identify the correlative problems. You got to make sure that you can figure out how to correlate successes and not overload the system. And then you've got to stay in that window, that lane, for a good amount of time till the athlete gets to a mature state that they're actually able to deal with the risk-reward relationship that the sport has to offer. And if you're pushing an athlete into the risk-reward relationship too early, we're just playing with fire at that point. And I've done it. I'm guilty of it. I know other coaches are probably guilty of it. And my point of this video is to bring light and shed light on that. For me personally, I've learned how to avoid the consequence by staying in the lane of confidence and correlation and staying away from the whole consequence world until the athlete is mature enough, has proven, has a long history record that they can handle the risk-reward relationship of the skills, and then that's when they enter that. So, love to hear your comments, your thoughts, what you liked, what you don't like. If you have other techniques or tactics, if I didn't explain something well and you need clarity on something, or if you'd like to add something, let me know. Remember to like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends. Until then, keep coaching. Have a great day.